Name, USS Midway. Namesake, Battle of Midway. Ordered, the 1st of August 1942. Builder, Newport News Shipbuilding. Laid down, the 27th of October 1943. Launched, the 20th of March 1945. Commissioned, the 10th of September 1945. Decommissioned, the 11th of April 1992. In service, 1945. Out of service, 1992. Stricken, the 17th of March 1997. Nickname, Midway Magic. Status, museum ship at the USS Midway Museum in San Diego, California. Class and type, Midway class aircraft carrier. Displacement, 45,000 tons at commissioning, 64,000 tons at decommissioning. Length, 1,001 feet, 305 meters. Beam, 121 feet, 37 meters. 136 feet, 41 meters, 238 feet, 73 meters. At flight deck after modernization. Draft, 34.5 feet, 10.5 meters. Propulsion, 12 boilers, 4 Westinghouse geared steam turbines. Speed, 33 knots, 61 km per hour. 38 miles per hour. Complement, 4,104 officers and men. Armament, as built, 18x5/54 caliber Mark 16 guns, 84x Bofors 40mm guns, 68x Oerlikon 20mm cannons. After refit, 2 8-cell Sea Sparrow launchers, 2 Phalanx CIWS. Aircraft carried, 137 theoretical, 100, 1940 S-50s, 70, Vietnam retirement. USS Midway, CVB, or CVA, or CV-41, is an aircraft carrier, formerly of the United States Navy, the lead ship of her class. Commissioned a week after the end of World War II, Midway was the largest ship in the world until 1955, as well as the first US aircraft carrier too big to transit the Panama Canal. She operated for 47 years, during which time she saw action in the Vietnam War, and served as the Persian Gulf flagship in 1991's Operation Desert Storm. Decommissioned in 1992, she is now a museum ship at the USS Midway Museum, in San Diego, California, and is the only remaining inactive US aircraft carrier that is not an Essex-class aircraft carrier. Midway was laid down the 27th of October 1943 in Shipway 11 at Newport News Shipbuilding Co., Newport News, Virginia. Launched the 20th of March 1945, sponsored by Mrs. Bradford William Ripley Jr., and commissioned on the 10th of September 1945. 8 days after the surrender of Japan, with Captain Joseph F. Bolger in command. After shakedown in the Caribbean, Midway joined the U.S. Atlantic Fleet training schedule, with Norfolk as its home port. From the 20th of February 1946, it was the flagship for Carrier Division 1. In March, it participated in Operation Frostbite, testing the Ryan F.R Fireball and helicopter rescue techniques for cold weather operations in the Labrador Sea. In September 1947, a captured German V-2 rocket was test-fired from the flight deck in Operation Sandy, the first large rocket launch from a moving platform, and the only moving platform launch for a V-2. While the rocket lifted off, it then tilted, and broke up at 15,000 feet, 4,600 meters. On the 29th of October 1947, Midway sailed for the first of its annual deployments with the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean. Between deployments, Midway trained and received alterations to accommodate heavier aircraft as they were developed. In June 1951, Midway operated in the Atlantic off the Virginia Capes during carrier suitability tests of the F-9 F-5 Panther. On the 23rd of June, as commander, George Chamberlain Duncan attempted a landing in Buno 125,228, a downdraft just after the stern caused Duncan to crash. His plane's forward fuselage broke away and rolled down the deck, and he suffered burns. Footage of the crash has been used in several films, including Men of the Fighting Lady, Midway, and The Hunt for Red October. In 1952, the ship participated in Operation Mainbrace, North Sea maneuvers with NATO forces. Midway had an angled runway painted on the flight deck in May for touch and go landings following the pioneering trials of the technique aboard HMS Triumph. Successful demonstration of the possibilities caused widespread adoption of the angled flight deck in future aircraft carrier construction and modifications of existing carriers. On the 1st of October, the ship was redesignated CVA-41. Midway cleared Norfolk the 27th of December 1954 for a world cruise, sailing via the Cape of Good Hope for Taiwan, where it became the first large carrier in the 7th Fleet for operations in the Western Pacific until the 28th of June 1955. During these operations, Midway pilots flew cover for the evacuation from the Quemoy-Matsu crisis from the Tachin Islands of 15,000 Chinese nationalist troops and 20,000 Chinese civilians, along with their livestock. Controversy arose during the cruise when the Midway docked in Cape Town, South Africa. Democratic Senator Herbert Lemon sent a telegram to Secretary of the Navy Charles Thomas when he learned of a supposed United States Navy plan to segregate 400 non-European members of the crew of the Midway while it was in Cape Town. Fellow Democrat Senator Hubert Humphrey soon joined Lemon, additionally sending a letter to the Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, asking that immediate steps be taken to see that equal treatment is given to American service personnel allowed shore leave in South Africa, or eliminate Cape Town as a port of call, and that, to me this is a shocking of discrimination, that should not be tolerated by our government. Every American soldier or sailor is an American regardless of race, color, or creed, and is entitled to be respected and treated as such anywhere in the world. An anonymous Navy official stated that the Department of the Navy did not know of the arrangements that were to be made between the officers of the Midway and South African authorities, and that African American members of the crew would not be segregated while still aboard the Midway. Clarence Mitchell Jr. also urged Thomas not to allow the Midway to dock at Cape Town. James H. Smith Jr., acting Secretary of the Navy at the time, replied that the stop at Cape Town was merely to satisfy an operational logistic requirement, and that it was customary to observe local laws and regulations while visiting foreign ports. Captain Reynold Ellis Hoggle of the Midway stated that while in port, the Midway would be United States territory and federal United States laws would apply. In the end, the crew of the Midway were not made to abide by a Part 8, saying that at Hartley Vale this afternoon, and at the concert tonight, European and non-European members of the crew have been asked to attend. There will be no segregation whatsoever. On the 28th of June 1955, the ship sailed for Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, where Midway underwent an extensive modernization program, SCB-110, similar to SCB-125 for the Essex-class carriers. Midway received an enclosed hurricane bow, an aft-deck edge elevator, an angled flight deck, and steam catapults, returning to service on the 30th of September 1957. Homeported at Alameda, California, Midway began annual deployments bringing McDonnell F-3H Demons, North American FJ-4 Furies, Vought F-8 Crusaders, Douglas A-1 Sky Raiders, and Douglas A-3 Sky Warriors to the 7th Fleet in 1958, and into the South China Sea during the Laotian Crisis of Spring 1961. During the 1962 deployment, Midway recorded her 100,000th arrested landing as a ship's aircraft tested the air defense systems of Japan, Korea, Okinawa, the Philippines, and Taiwan. Midway again sailed for the Far East the 6th of March 1965, and from mid-April flew strikes against military and logistics installations in North and South Vietnam, including the first combat use of AGM-12 Bullpup Air 2 surface missiles. On the 17th of June 1965, two VF-21 McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom seconds flying from Midway were credited with the first confirmed MiG kills of the Vietnam conflict using AIM-7 Sparrow missiles to down two MiG-17s. 3 days later, 4 of Midway's A-1 Sky Raiders used the thatch weave to down an attacking MiG-17. Midway lost an F-4 Phantom and two A-4 Skyhawks to North Vietnamese S-75 Dvina surface-to-air missiles, before returning to Alameda on the 23rd of November to enter San Francisco Bay Naval Shipyard on the 11th of February 1966 for a massive modernization. SCB-101.66, which proved expensive and controversial. The flight deck was enlarged from 2.8 to 4 acres, 11,300 to 16,200 square meters, 122,000 to 174,000 square feet. And the angle of the flight deck landing area was increased to 13.5 degrees. The elevators were enlarged, moved, and given almost double the weight capacity. Midway also received new steam catapults, arresting gear, and a centralized air conditioning plant. Cost overruns raised the price of this program from $88 million to $202 million, and precluded a similar modernization planned for Franklin D. Roosevelt. After Midway was finally recommissioned on the 31st of January 1970, it was found that the modifications had hurt the ship's seakeeping capabilities and ability to conduct air operations in rough seas, which made further modifications necessary to correct the problem. Midway returned to Vietnam, and on the 18th of May 1971, after relieving Hancock on Yankee Station, began single-carrier operations. Midway departed Yankee Station on the 5th of June, completing the vessel's final line period on the 31st of October 1971, and returned to the ship's home port on the 6th of November 1971. Midway, with embarked carrier Air Wing 5, CVW-5, again departed Alameda for operations off Vietnam on the 10th of April 1972. On the 11th of May, aircraft from Midway, along with those from Coral Sea, Kitty Hawk, and Constellation, continued laying naval mines off North Vietnamese ports, including Than Hoa, Ng Hai, Vinh, Honorable Gay, Quan Ket, and Camp Phar, as well as other approaches to Haiphong. Ships that were in port in Haiphong had been advised that the mining would take place, and that the mines would be armed 72 hours later. Midway continued Vietnam operations during Operation Linebacker throughout the summer of 1972. On the 7th of August 1972, an HC-7Det-110 helicopter, flying from Midway, and aided by planes from the carrier and from Saratoga, searched for the pilot of an A-7 Corsair second aircraft from Saratoga, who had been downed the previous day by a surface-to-air missile about 20 miles. 32 kilometers, inland, northwest of Vinh. Flying over mountains, the HC-7 helicopter spotted the downed aviator with its searchlight, and, under heavy ground fire, retrieved him and returned to an LPD off the coast. This was the deepest penetration of a rescue helicopter into North Vietnam since 1968. By the end of 1972, HC-7Det-110 had rescued 48 pilots, 35 in combat conditions. On the 5th of October 1973, Midway, with CVW-5, put into Yokosuka, Japan, marking the first forward deployment of a complete carrier task group in a Japanese port, the result of an accord arrived at on the 31st of August 1972 between the US and Japan. The move allowed sailors to live with their families when in port. More strategically, it allowed 3 carriers to stay in the Far East even as the economic situation demanded the reduction of carriers in the fleet. CVW-5 became based at the nearby Naval Air Facility at Suji. For service in Vietnam from the 30th of April 1972 to the 9th of February 1973, Midway and CVW-5 received the Presidential Unit Citation from Richard Nixon. It read, for extraordinary heroism and outstanding performance of duty in action against enemy forces in Southeast Asia from the 30th of April 1972 to the 9th of February 1973. During this crucial period of the Vietnam conflict, USS Midway and embarked attack carrier Air Wing 5 carried out devastating aerial attacks against enemy installations, transportation, and lines of communications in the face of extremely heavy opposition, including multi-caliber anti-aircraft artillery fire and surface-to-air missiles. Displaying superb airmanship and unwavering courage, Midway/C.V.W5 pilots played a significant role in lifting the prolonged sieges at NLC, Kontum, and Quang Tia, and in carrying out the concentrated aerial strikes against the enemy's industrial heartland, which eventually resulted in a ceasefire. By their excellent teamwork, dedication, and sustained superior performance, the officers and men of Midway and attack carrier Air Wing 5 reflected great credit upon themselves and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Aircraft from Midway made the first MiG kills in the Vietnam War and the last air-to-air victory of the war. On the 17th of June 1965, aviators of Midway's attack carrier Wing 2, VF-21 down at the first two MiGs credited to US forces in Southeast Asia. On the 12th of January 1973, a combat aircraft from Midway made the last air-to-air victory of the Vietnam War. On the 19th of April 1975, after North Vietnam had overrun 2/3 of South Vietnam, Midway, along with Coral Sea, Hancock, Enterprise and Okinawa, were sent to the waters off South Vietnam. 10 days later, US 7th Fleet forces carried out the Operation Frequent Wind Evacuation. Midway, which had offloaded half of the ship's regular combat air wing at NS Subic Bay, Philippines, steamed to Thailand, and took aboard 8 CH-53 from 21st Special Operations Squadron and 2 HH-53 helicopters from 40th Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron. As Saigon fell to the North Vietnamese, these helicopters ferried hundreds of US personnel and Vietnamese people to Midway and other US ships in the South China Sea. On the 29th of April 1975, Republic of Vietnam Air Force, RVNAF, Major Buong Lai, also spelled Buong Lee, loaded his wife and 5 children into a two-seat Cessna Row-1 Bird Dog and took off from Con Sung Island. After evading enemy ground fire, Buong headed out to the South China Sea, found Midway, and began to circle overhead with his landing lights turned on. Midway's crew unsuccessfully attempted to contact the aircraft on emergency frequencies. When a spotter reported that there were at least 4 people in the two-seater aircraft, all thoughts of forcing the pilot to ditch alongside were abandoned. After 3 tries, Major Buong managed to drop a note from a low pass over the deck. "Can you move the helicopter to the other side? I can land on your runway. I can fly for 1 hour more. We have enough time to move. Please rescue me." Major Buong, wife and 5 child, Captain Larry Chambers, the ship's commanding officer, ordered that the arresting wires be removed, and that any helicopters that could not be safely and quickly moved should be pushed over the side. He called for volunteers, and soon every available seaman was on deck to help. An estimated $10 million worth of U.H-1 Huai helicopters were pushed overboard. With a 500-foot, 150 meters, ceiling, 5-mile, 8.0 kilometers, visibility, light rain, and 15 knots, 28 km/h. 17 miles per hour of surface wind, Chambers ordered the ship to make 25 knots, 46 km/h. 29 miles per hour into the wind. Warnings about the dangerous downdrafts created behind the steaming carrier were transmitted blind in both Vietnamese and English. To make matters worse, 5 more U.H-1s landed and cluttered up the deck. Without hesitation, Chambers ordered them scuttled as well. Captain Chambers recalled that the aircraft cleared the ramp and touched down on centerline at the normal touchdown point. Had he been equipped with a tail hook, he could have bagged a number 3 wire. He bounced once and came stop a beam of the island amid a wildly cheering, arms-waving flight deck crew. Buang was escorted to the bridge where Chambers congratulated him on his outstanding airmanship and his bravery in risking everything on a gamble beyond the point of no return without knowing for certain a carrier would be where he needed it. The crew of Midway was so impressed that they established a fund to help him and his family get settled in the United States. The O-1 that Major Buang landed is now on display at the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. Major Buang became the first Vietnamese pilot ever to land on an aircraft carrier deck. Upon completion of ferrying people to other ships, Midway returned to Thailand and disembarked the Air Force helicopters at Utapao Royal Thai Navy Airfield. The CH-53s then airlifted over 50 RVNAF aircraft to the ship. With almost 100 helicopters and aircraft of the former RVNAF aboard, the ship steamed to Guam, where the aircraft and helicopters were offloaded in 24 hours. While transiting back to the Philippines to pick up the ship's air wing, Midway was rerouted to act as a floating airfield in support of Special Operation Forces rescuing the SS Mayaguez. Midway picked up the ship's regular air wing again a month later, when the aircraft carrier returned NASQB. Philippines. On the 21st of August 1976, a Navy task force headed by Midway made a show of force off the coast of Korea in response to an unprovoked attack on 2 US Army officers who were killed by North Korean guards on the 18th of August. The US response to this incident was Operation Paul Bunan. Midway's response was in support of a US demonstration of military concern versus North Korea. Midway relieved Constellation as the Indian Ocean contingency carrier on the 16th of April 1979. This unscheduled deployment was due to USS Ranger colliding with tanker Liberian Fortune near the Straits of Malacca, with Midway taking over Ranger's mission while it went in for repair. Midway and its escorts continued a significant American naval presence in the oil-producing region of the Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf. On the 18th of November, the aircraft carrier arrived in the northern part of the Arabian Sea in connection with the continuing hostage crisis in Iran. Militant followers of the Ayatollah Khomeini, who had come to power following the overthrow of the Shah, seized the US Embassy in Tehran on the 4th of November and held 63 US citizens hostage. Midway was joined the 21st of November by Kitty Hawk, and both carriers, along with their escort ships, were joined by Nimitz and its escorts on the 22nd of January 1980. Midway was relieved by Coral Sea on the 5th of February. Following a period in Yokosuka, Midway relieved Coral Sea the 30th of May 1980 on standby south of the Jeju-do Islands in the Sea of Japan following the potential of civil unrest in the Republic of Korea. While transiting the passage between Palawan Island of the Philippines and the coast of northern Borneo on the 29th of July, the Panamanian merchant ship Cactus collided with Midway. Cactus was 450 nautical miles, 830 kilometers, southwest of Subic Bay and headed to Singapore. The collision occurred near the liquid oxygen plant and 2 sailors working in the plant were killed, and 3 were injured. Midway sustained light damage and 3 F-4 Phantom aircraft parked on the flight deck were also damaged. On the 17th of August, Midway relieved Constellation to begin another Indian Ocean deployment and to complement the Dwight D. Eisenhower task group still on contingency duty in the Arabian Sea. Midway spent a total of 118 consecutive days in the Indian Ocean during 1980. On the 16th of March 1981, an A-6 intruder from VA-115 aboard Midway sighted a downed civilian helicopter in the South China Sea. Midway immediately dispatched HC-1 Det helicopters to the scene. All 17 people aboard the downed helicopter were rescued and brought aboard the carrier. The chartered civilian helicopter was also plucked out of the water and lifted to Midway's flight deck. On the 25th of March 1986, the final carrier launching of a Navy Fleet F-4S Phantom II took place off Midway during flight operations in the East China Sea. The Phantoms were replaced by the new F/A-18 Hornets. Midway continued serving in the Western Pacific throughout the 1980s. In order to alleviate persistent seakeeping issues, Midway received hull blisters in 1986. During her 1986 refit, named Extended Incremental Selected Repair Availability blisters were added to improve the ship's stability. The modification proved unsuccessful and actually increased the ship's instability in rough seas. She took water over the flight deck during excessive rolls in moderate seas, thereby hampering flight operations. Before another $138 million refit was approved to rectify the stability problems, it was even proposed to decommission Midway. Nevertheless, she had earned herself the nickname Rock and Roll Carrier. During a typhoon, while in the Sea of Japan during the Olympic Games in Korea, October 8, 1988, the Midway, which was not supposed to be able to survive more than 24 degrees of roll, sustained a 26-degree roll and withstood it. On the 30th of October 1989, an F/A-18 Hornet aircraft from Midway mistakenly dropped a 500 pounds, 227 kilograms, general-purpose bomb on the deck of Reeves during training exercises in the Indian Ocean, creating a 5-foot, 1.5 meters, hole in the bow, sparking small fires, and injuring 5 sailors. Reeves was 32 miles, 51 kilometers, south of Diego at the time of the incident. Disaster struck Midway on the 20th of June 1990. While conducting routine flight operations approximately 125 nautical miles, 232 kilometers, 144 miles, northeast of Japan, the ship was badly damaged by 2 onboard explosions. These explosions led to a fire that raged more than 10 hours. In addition to damage to the ship's hull, 2 crew members were killed, and 9 others were wounded. One of the injured later died of his injuries. All 11 crewmen belonged to the at-sea firefighting team known as the Flying Squad. When Midway entered Yokosuka harbor the next day, 12 Japanese media helicopters flew in circles and hovered about 150 feet, 46 meters, above the flight deck. 3 busloads of reporters were waiting on the pier. About 30 minutes after Midway cast its first line, more than 100 international print and electronic journalists charged over the brow to cover the event. The news media made a major issue out of the incident, as it happened amid several other military accidents. It was thought that the accident would lead to the ship's immediate retirement due to its age, but instead Midway was retained to fight in one last major conflict. On the 2nd of August 1990, Iraq invaded neighboring Kuwait and US forces moved into Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield to protect that country against invasion by Iraq. On the 1st of November 1990, Midway was again on station in the North Arabian Sea being the carrier of Battle Force Zulu, which included warships from the US, Australia, and other countries, relieving independence. On the 15th of November, the aircraft carrier participated in Operation Imminent Thunder, an 8-day combined amphibious landing exercise in northeastern Saudi Arabia which involved about 1,000 US Marines, 16 warships, and more than 1,100 aircraft. Meanwhile, the United Nations set an ultimatum deadline of the 15th of January 1991 for Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. Operation Desert Storm began the next day, and the Navy launched 228 sorties from Midway and Ranger in the Persian Gulf, from Theodore Roosevelt en route to the Gulf, and from John F. Kennedy, Saratoga, and America in the Red Sea. In addition, the Navy launched more than 100 Tomahawk missiles from 9 ships in the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Desert Storm officially ended the 27th of February, and Midway departed the Persian Gulf on the 11th of March 1991, and returned to Yokosuka. In June 1991, Midway left for its final deployment, this time to the Philippines, to take part in Operation Fiery Vigil, which was the evacuation of 20,000 military members including their families from Clark Air Base on the island of Luzon after the eruption of Mount Pinatubo. Midway, along with 20 other US naval ships, ferried the evacuees to the island of Cebu, where they were taken off the ship by helicopter. After taking part in the evacuation, the aircraft carrier once again returned to Yokosuka. In August 1991, Midway departed Yokosuka and returned to Pearl Harbor. There, it turned over with Independence, which was to replace Midway as the forward deployed carrier in Yokosuka. Rear Admiral Joseph Pruha and the staff of Carrier Group 1 cross-decked from Independence. Pruha was the last admiral to break his flag on Midway. She then sailed to Seattle for a port visit. The ship then disembarked Tiger's guests of crew members before making her final voyage to San Diego. Midway was decommissioned at Naval Air Station North Island on the 11th of April 1992 in a ceremony in which the main speaker was Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. The ship was stricken from the Naval Vessel Register on the 17th of March 1997. During decommissioning, Midway, its sailors, and their families were filmed for the movie At Sea, a documentary on carrier life shown only at the Navy Museum in Washington, D.C. on the 30th of September 2003. Midway began its journey from the Navy Inactive Ship Maintenance Facility, Bremerton, Washington, to San Diego, California, in preparation for use as a museum and memorial. The aircraft carrier was docked in early October at the Charles P. Howard Terminal in Oakland, California, while work proceeded on the Broadway Pier in downtown San Diego. On the 10th of January 2004, the ship was moored at its final location, where it was opened to the public on the 7th of June 2004 as a museum. In the first year of operation, the museum had 879,281 visitors, double the expected attendance. On the 11th of November 2012, a college basketball game between the Syracuse Orange and the San Diego State Aztecs was played on the flight deck. The Orange won, 62-49. On the 15th of July 2015, museum personnel were evacuated from Midway due to smoke caused by an apparent fire. The San Diego Fire Department responded quickly, but no fire was found, and the museum was able to open for the day on schedule.